I'm joined by Ryan Reynolds. Ryan is, let's see, an actor.
Yes.
Yeah. Ryan, this is a long time coming. I know you're a big TCM fan. Thank you for
TCM fan.
turning up for us. I appreciate
My
it.
God, I'm not normally nervous about doing interviews, but to show up on TCM, which is on, this is not an exaggeration, it is on in my home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it's sort of my digital comfort blanket in a weird way. And it's kind of become that way for my kids. Some of the movies I'm sure are damaging them, but no worse than I am.
That's right.
So, yeah.
You programmed 2 films.
Yes, sir.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. First, John Hughes picture of 1987, Steve Martin, John Candy. And then after that, we'll have Grosse Pointe Blank. You're not merely a guest programmer. I want to make sure I get this right. You're also you're the guest curator at the TCM Julian's auction. That's going to be at Comic-Con at the end of July. And your character for your new film, Deadpool, was... You're contributing some of that material to the auction.
So happy to do it. Yeah. Also, I think it's an opportunity to like really bridge, create a little bit of a bridge for, I do a lot of speaking events where I'm talking a bit about my career in the business side of things, and also my career in the showbiz side.
Are people interested in your career?
Sometimes, sometimes they're very good at better at acting than I am. So they seem quite attentive. But the one thing I think is really important is that people ask, like, how do you approach some of this stuff? What's the best kind of method or mode for me to enter this business, show business? Young people really want to be a part of this, and I think. For me, I never took proper acting classes. I know some viewers right now are nodding in agreement, but I also, I spent my early days in improv, which I felt like taught me as much, if not more, than any acting class ever could have. And the other thing is TCM really did give me a sort of a scope and some encyclopedic library in my mind of not just narratives and performances, but also shots. And if I'm somebody who's 19 to 25, 26 right now, my advice would be turn TCM on and leave it on and just let it wash over you. Don't worry about sitting there and going, okay, what is this movie and how do I break it down and why is this good, why is this bad? Just let it wash over you.
Yeah, not whether this is realistic, right? Just take in the manner in which stories were told.
Because you guys show bad movies sometimes. Like you get to see, you see great actors in terrible movies sometimes. And you see terrible actors in a great movie. It's
elevating it a little bit.
Yeah, it's wild.
So we're going to start with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Please,
from Paramount in '87. What drew you to this movie then, and what draws you to it now?
I've always been a bit of an obsessive over John Candy, and certainly Steve Martin as well.
You're from another land.
Yes, from the
Canada.
Canada,
yeah, which is, I think, north of us.
It is north of us.
And John Candy, I imagine, for Canadian actors of your generation and generations to follow, is fairly revered.
Yes. What Candy does in Planes, Trains is that he gives us this glimpse into his vulnerability and his humanity that you don't see in as many other films of his, and how these kind of maladaptive coping mechanisms that we use to sort of avoid life's harsher truths or emotional pain that we're going through, how those kind of act as a sort of a balm and help us get from one place to another. And his maladaptive coping mechanism in that movie is that he's like this incredibly clingy, in Steve Martin's eyes at least, Neil Page character, annoying ass clown who just keeps showing up everywhere he goes. You kind of get to see why he does that, and I find it incredibly moving and heartbreaking. I try to put something from Planes, Trains in almost everything I do. I mean, if you see Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2, certainly Deadpool and Wolverine, which is now coming out, there's a nod to John Candy and or Planes, Trains in every single one of those movies. Every time I license the book that Candy's holding that's called Canadian Mounted, where he's reading it in the airport, every time I have to call Paramount and give them $5,000, and I get to take the book and I get to put it on camera bury it somewhere in Deadpool. But there's also a lot of the writing is inspired by that odd couple pairing, which I think is really beautiful.
Well, take a look at the movie. It's a road trip film with these two guys, and Steve Martin seems like the more important character, but I think the more times I see it, this movie's really about John Candy, and Steve Martin is us. Yes. Steve Martin is the recognition of what's happening to Candy throughout the film.
He acts as the audience. Yes. So, and that's something that I steal from Steve Martin all the time, which is sit in the movie theater while you're making the movie. And I feel like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, as well as the other one I'm going to program in this movie, are movies that I suspect now at 47 years old that I could look back and know that those are movies that the filmmakers really listened to the movie. Because if you listen to your movie while you're making it, it will not only speak to you, it'll yell at you. And if you stick super close to just the script and the shot list, you can lose your footing really, really quickly. So these are movies that I think really had filmmakers that, and I say filmmakers in the plural because it's John Hughes, but I think Steve Martin as a premier storyteller, as do I feel the same way about John Candy. I feel like they were really listening to each other and the movie as it was being made and pivoting in beautiful ways. And the movie, I watch it probably 2 or 3 times a year, and it's one of my favorites of all time.
All right, let's watch it now. We'll talk more afterwards.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds, thanks very much. Here's the film from Paramount in 1987, written and directed by John Hughes, Steve Martin, John Candy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Back here with Ryan Reynolds, our guest programmer tonight. Picked 2 films. So the one you just saw, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We'll have Grosse Pointe Blank coming up in a bit. Ryan's new film, Deadpool and Wolverine, out soon. Thanks very much for coming on TCM. I know the channel's important to you, and it means a lot to have actors of your magnitude coming on.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is a movie you say you watch at least a couple times a year.
Yeah.
That it is noteworthy that John Hughes chose as the last shot of that film is just Candy. And his face is saying, I'm very happy to be here, and I love that you and your wife love each other, and God, I miss my wife.
It doesn't feel like a moment of envy. He's happy for Steve Martin in that moment to have that thing that he's lost.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if the words Edie McClurg didn't come up in some discussion of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Come on. So one of the all-timers.
That's right. I mean, she's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, so memorably for John Hughes. Yep. She's the principal's secretary. But here she's the rental car agent after he... There's no V5. There's no car there.
Yes,
right?
One of the great speeches.
Right.
But also, Edie McClurg's testament to how powerful you can be listening in a scene and listening to Steve Martin just go on this profanity-laced tirade for her. I always think about that moment too as one of my favorite scenes. Probably my favorite scene is in the motel room between Steve and John Candy. But one of my favorite scenes is that one because you think, wow, you guys burned the R rating.
Yeah, for
this scene.
And how long that scene is? It's 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, less than 2 minutes. It's
but in this era, there is almost no studio on earth that would say, no. We're not going rated R, so you can have this one fucking scene.
That's right.
With a fucking car, with this fucking woman.
He says it 18 times, and then she has the capper.
May I see your rental agreement?
I threw it away.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, what?
You're fucked.
Just one of the all-time, talk about, a nerve-wracking too. Imagine that day going into work and you're thinking like, oh my God, like I just have to hit this one note perfectly. And boy, does she ever.
And her stuff at the beginning, ad-lib. Just start talking. So she just started talking about Thanksgiving. It's so funny. It sets it up perfectly.
So much of when I was writing on Deadpool and Wolverine, so much of Planes, Trains is Planes, Trains influences so much of that writing. And in particular, there's a scene with Steve Martin and John Candy in the motel after Candy hands over his Casio watch to get a room for the night. And there's a moment where obviously where Steve Martin goes on a complete, absolutely gives John Candy a full strip down and just rips him in this sequence. And it is harsh. It is funny as hell. So it's a real tightrope walk, but it's also harsh. And there's a moment that I find very inspiring, which is that you can see this ever so slight flick of regret that clicks across Steve's eyes, because Steve is a beautiful actor.
As he's doing it, yeah.
Yeah, you see John Candy, all of that humanity and that pain, what he's really actually going through in that moment, that loneliness that just can't really be filled by anything other than someone like Neil Page. I find it incredibly inspiring, and there's a moment in Deadpool and Wolverine that is so slightly, I think people will catch is very reminiscent of that, and a moment that I think is, if I'm the John Candy character in Deadpool and Wolverine, Hugh would be the Steve Martin character.
And Hugh is...
Huge asshole, yes. sorry, where were you going with that? You were going somewhere
I was
else.
Hugh Jackman. He's another,
Yeah, Hugh Jackman.
He's another
Hugh Jackman,
film
Hugh
actor.
Laurie, Hugh Grant, they're all in it. We got the Hughes to get to the movie's huge.
You mind putting your mask back on? Super hard to eat while I'm wearing it. It's super hard to eat when you're not.
Yeah, Hugh is phenomenal. Just obviously a Swiss Army knife type of actor who can do so many things. One of which I love seeing is when Hugh is vulnerable. Yeah.
Well, so it's you and Hugh Jackman in Deadpool and Wolverine coming soon.
Yes, sir.
Ryan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
But don't go away because Ryan's got another film to talk about. He'll have John Cusack in Grosse Pointe Blank. That's next on TCM.
Next on TCM, Grosse Pointe Blank, then Red Light, and later, The French Lieutenant's Woman. Rendezvous with TCM tonight.